Just a question on the development activity report. The item with regard to McKay Street, 712, 714, says that the date of decision, final hearing March 11th. I'm just looking for some clarification since we're at March 11th as to what that means.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was the intention to have the final consideration this evening. However, we are waiting for the return of the bylaw from the Ministry of Transportation.
There we go. All right. Ladies and gentlemen of the public, I apologize to you. We had one small section of the cord unplugged. All right. We will continue, though. So the 2023 to 2026 strategic plan is, I'm almost wondering whether I should back up, but I won't, is a plan that was already developed in 2024 or earlier this year. We sat down and updated that plan. And so this is just simply rolling in those updates into the plan, but the plan remains the same planning document. That way we're able to say, this was planned, we got this done, this is still in the works. All right. Any questions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. All right. The next item up is item number 6B. It is a report from the Director of Corporate and Legislative Services with regards to 234 11th Avenue East. It's a remedial action order. Because of the nature of the order, I'm actually going to read the entire thing. It's fairly lengthy, I warned you. The recommendation is the council directs staff to proceed with a remedial action order under Section 73 of the Community Charter, whereby the City of Prince Rupert will proceed with the building removal located at 234 11th Avenue East, with the cost of removal placed on the property taxes for the said property. And that council directs staff to provide notice to the property owner in accordance with Section 77 of the Community Charter. And that council agree that reconsideration of these orders may be made in writing within 14 days of the notice provided under Section 77 of the Community Charter. And that if no reconsideration notices are received within 14 days of the notice provided staff are directed to proceed with the remedial action orders immediately as requested. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Forrester, Councillor Adey, and is that a question, or Councillor Cunningham?
I noticed that the registered letter was returned to the city undelivered.
Director Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The registered letter with respect to this remedial action order was a warning letter. It's not actually the order. The actual order will be issued after pending the council's decision this evening. That was merely a kind reminder from bylaw.
Okay. So just for real clarity on that, those letters that are sent out, and the warning letters, are not required in order to implement the remedial action. It's a courtesy. Councillor Cunningham.
So do we have a further contact for the owner? I'm assuming taxes have been paid on this in the last few years, so they must be coming from somewhere, because when we do give them an order now, that it'd be nice if it actually was.
Yeah. Director Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under the community charter, we're required to send the registered notice to the address on title, and then subsequent to that, any other address that I may be aware of later after the fact. So we will send out the order in accordance with the act and then move forward with any other way that we can find them and then provide that notice.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Item number C, 6C, is a report from the Director of Corporate and Legislative Services. It is almost identical, except that it's at 309 McBride Street. It's a remedial action order, but I will read it. That Council directs staff to proceed with the remedial action order under Section 73 of the Community Charter, whereby the City of Prince Rupert will proceed with the building removal located at 309 McBride with the costs of removal placed on the property taxes for the said property, and that Council directs staff to provide notice to the property owner in accordance with Section 77 of the Community Charter, and that Council agree that reconsideration of these orders may be made in writing within 14 days of the notice provided under Section 77 of the Community Charter, and that if no reconsideration notices are received within 14 days of the notice provided, staff are directed to proceed with the remedial action orders immediately as requested. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Forrester. Any discussion? Councillor Adey.
I just note that this particular location is also the part of town that's been identified as the gateway to the downtown area. It's a very strategic location in terms of redeveloping downtown. So I'm curious about, other than what would be, in my view, the best thing to happen, and that's to have the Green Apple reconstructed in that location. If we can't have that, I'm wondering what consideration we might have in one of either the following events. One, that the building is actually taken down as a result of this process, and what then might emerge in its place at this strategic location. And the other would be if, in fact, the alternative happens and there is reconsideration and some remediation. Do we have any either recourse or desire to have a voice in what might take place there, given the central location of that building?
It's a great question. Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, I'm struggling to come up with a good answer on this. Our official community plan lays out a vision for the downtown. That's, we encourage private development to occur in accordance with that. We don't have any plans for that property at this point because it's not ours. There's a process to go through. And one of the options is that indeed the owners do come up with a proposal in writing for council consideration. So it's really too early to speak to what might go there in its place.
Okay. Any Councillor Randhawa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, is there we have any knowledge like who is the title holder right now that property?
I'm sorry?
Who's the title holder of that property?
I'm not sure I should name the title holder. Dr. Buchan? All
right. We would caution against that. We'd want to make sure that we were not releasing private information at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the reason I am asking, like the one of the owner, I don't know if he still was owner on that title.
Yes.
He passed away a few weeks ago.
Yes.
And then I don't know like where we should send the paper.
I know that staff are aware of the potential concern, and that may bring complication into proceeding with the order. But it doesn't mean the order can't go ahead. It would just be if that's the case, it could be dealing with an estate instead of the owner. Yeah. Councillor Cunningham.
Well, that whole corner, with the exception of the RCMP building, is privately owned. Excuse me, and the Gateway project was going to be on the other side, and it stalled. So, like the two lots where the credit union had cleared up. And I have heard nothing more about. A lot of people wonder what's going on there at the credit union site, as well as the vacant lot across from it. There was artist renditions of what it was going to be and things like that 3-4 years ago, and nothing's been done. So if there's lack of development on that side of the road with that deep hole there, it'd be interesting what somebody would put in there. But you know, they'd have to have deep pockets to put something in there. But it's a prime, like Councillor 80 says, it's a prime location, and it's, as you come into the city, it'd be nice to see something there.
Great.
But
Right. Again, just for people that are not be fully acquainted with the 2030 plan, but the notion of a gateway district, which is kind of the link to all the other districts, that whole hub is considered that. The RCMP building is certainly a significant improvement in that corner. When it's completed, I think it'll be a very beautiful building. But you're absolutely right. There are other corners there that need to be developed for that gateway vision to emerge. The other little bit of translation I would do for those that are newer to the community is when Councillor 80 talked about reviving the Green Apple. It was a great fish and chips place that sat in a very similar building that unfortunately became unsafe and had to be torn down, right beside the building that we're talking about. Anyway, any other questions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. And just to test my speed reading and speaking skills, we have one more. At 10056 8th Avenue East, it's a report from the Director of Corporate and Legislative Services. With a recommendation that Council directs staff to proceed with the remedial action order under Section 73 of the Community Charter, whereby the City of Prince Rupert will proceed with the building removal located at 1056 8th Avenue East, with the cost of removal placed on the property taxes for said property, and that Council directs staff to provide notice to the property owner in accordance with Section 77 of the Community Charter, and that Council agree that reconsideration of these orders may be made in writing within 14 days of the notice provided under Section 77 of the Community Charter, and that if no reconsideration notices are received within 14 days of the notice provided, staff are directed to proceed with the remedial action orders immediately as requested. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillors Skelton, Morvan, Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. Thank you very much. We have the late item number 6E. It's overland water main replacement. It is a recommendation that Mayor and Council pass a resolution to award the overland water main replacement phase 1 to Broadwater Industries. There is information in the report that follows. There are 3 bids that came in. The lowest by considerable measure was Broadwater, and in addition, Broadwater has been identified as the lowest compliant bidder. So in other words, the bids are reviewed to make sure that the contractor is capable of performing the work. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillors Forrester and Randhawa, any questions or comments? All in favor? Oh, Councillor Forrester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Broadwater came in significantly lower than the other 2. Is that normal? Because it's several $1 million, almost $2 million lower. Is it?
It's a good question.
It's a pretty, like, are we going to find after the fact that they underbid and they want more money, or is it that's the most we're going to pay them?
Director Buchan, or Dr. Buck.
Your Worship, it is not unusual to find significant spreads for bids, especially when things are busy and somebody, a contractor, might not know the property, the area as well, or might see an opportunity for a bigger profit margin. Our confidence with the bid that is, that is recommended is that they're a local known contractor and we know they can do the work. So, we're confident in that bid. We can't really say what the agenda or what the motives were for those higher ones, but we are confident in the one that's recommended.
Great. Councillor Cunningham.
well, speaking on that, Broadwater is rather very adept at this type of work. They have both marine barge spud, barge, everything to do it, where other contractors might have to contract that out to another contractor. They're doing everything in-house, and I'm really happy to see a local contractor that has totally 100% local workforce from Prince Rupert getting this contract rather than what we've seen even with so-called local contractors bringing a lot of people in from out of town. So I'm really happy and support this.
All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Council, it's your turn. Any questions or comments from council? Councillor Adie, I know you've got at least one.
Okay, go ahead.
At least one. I actually have three, and they're multi-part items. So my
So-
apologies in advance.
So that's not really three.
Well, it's never mind. So they are in no particular order. The recent incident at the landfill, the federal funding announcement, and healthcare. So I'll kind of go one step at a time, I think, and you can direct the questions accordingly. There wasn't a spill in the liquid waste pond at the landfill. It's become fairly well known in the public realm. So I have some questions about that, and I'll just go through them. The first question is, prior to the incident, did the existing liquid waste pond conform to regulatory standards?
Yeah, Dr. Buchan.
I'm sorry, I should let the question finish. I was just getting ready to offer my response.
Okay.
And the rest of the question was, if it didn't conform, why not? And if so, what were the gaps in the existing regulations that allowed this to happen?
Perfect. My apologies for cutting you off, Councillor. Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, the answer is yes, it conformed with the regulatory standards.
Okay.
Therefore, do we know about any gaps in those standards which allowed this to happen? Because it happened.
Fair enough. Dr. Buchan.
There were no gaps in the standards. It conformed. We, in anticipation of a subsequent question, we will be doing more work there to help prevent such a thing in the future, but it conformed to the standards.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Councillor Adie.
Number two. This is an event involving a third party, and without being specific, in general terms, what is the contractual agreement with third parties in terms of waste disposal and liability for hazardous materials and so on?
Yeah. Perhaps even in the context of the discussion, if I could, just so people understand fully, maybe a quick descriptor of what this facility is. People know the landfill, but this is another piece of the landfill. So, in answering that question, Dr. Buchan, can you give a little bit of background?
Your Worship, I'll try, and if I'm wrong, I'll ask Director Pucci to jump in and correct me. It's a facility for processing liquid waste, more commonly known as septage.
Okay. And the answer to the question was, sorry, I distracted you.
The contractual,
right?
What are
the nature? This material was dumped in there. What's that relationship that we have with that contractor or whatever?
Your Worship, there is no contractual arrangement under our current scheme with users of the facility. It is a regulatory relationship. The regulations are set out in the bylaw, and people are expected to comply with the bylaw. We may be amending that in the future, because the way it is right now, it's people that use it have to inform themselves. Contractual arrangement forces the awareness a little more effectively, perhaps.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor.
I'll carry on perhaps as a follow-up, and there may not be a ready answer to the next one yet, but I think it's a reflection of some public discourse that has taken place. There is some commentary that be some form of punitive consequence beyond the cost of remediation. And I appreciate this is still evolving, but where are we in terms of considering what the outcome might be in terms of consequence?
Dr. Buchan.
Your worship, there is a provision in the bylaw for fining, the punitive, and that's a matter that we have not yet addressed because we have been working on understanding exactly what happened and what was put in. We're well along on that now. So with respect to deciding if there is a punitive aspect to this, that's something that we may consult with council if that is something council wants us to look at. And if we do that, we may have to bring that back to an appropriate council venue.
Great. And is it fair to say that there's, sorry, I will come to you, Councillor, I promise. We're still investigating, is it fair to say, you know, to accurately determine the nature of the material and those things?
The process is not being complete.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Adie, I'm going to come to you, but sorry, Councillor, go ahead, Councillor Cunningham.
Well, is not Environment Canada, the Minister of the Environment, also investigating this, and there might be fines from them also?
Dr. Buchan.
Your worship, the answer is yes.
Okay. Councillor Adie.
And now to the what we do about all this question. And as Councillor Cunningham pointed out, Environment Canada is involved. So what measures have been or will be taken, and some of this is at the direction of the federal authorities, I assume. So what measures have been or will be taken to avoid future incidents of this kind?
Dr. Buchan.
Your worship, I can advise that staff are going to be revising the bylaw partly in response to this. It was due for an update anyways, but with this occurrence, we'll be turning our mind specifically to how to best safeguard against a similar event occurring in the future so that it doesn't. With respect to specific measures that may be taken, I'm going to defer that to Director Pucci, who can give a better description of that.
Director Pucci.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, right now we are working with McElhaney on bird protection, bird controls to go over top of the facility before we open it up. We're also looking at cameras. We're looking at new controls in the scale house and ensuring that we have better contractual obligations between the users through the bylaw. So all of those will be addressed and submitted to Environment Canada and the Ministry of Environment as part of our order that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adie.
My last one on this item, and then perhaps following that, if anybody else wants to jump in while we're on this, that might be the best time to do it. This has to do with the cultural significance of eagles to First Nations peoples and the unfortunate loss of 19 eagles as a result of this incident. So my questions are, as a result, what steps are being taken to work with First Nations in response to this incident? And second, to establish an understanding that will inform any future incident that has similar cultural implications.
Yep. Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, I'll defer this to
Director Pucci.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is the first incident of this kind that we've had. So, you know, I hope everyone appreciates that. Our liquid waste facility or septage facility has only been open for 6 months. We've never had one in the past, so it's new for us. We've already been in touch with one of the local nations about the eagles, and we will be making contact with the other ones as well, and looking at how, if this incident or something like this does happen on the site again, that we can work more in concert together. So we are appreciating the significance, and we will be putting measures in place in case something like this ever happens again, which I hope it doesn't. Thank you.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that, you know, it was just something that was not anticipated, and that in terms of the cultural piece, weren't well prepared. And we want to use this as an incident to become well prepared for should anything of a similar nature occur. Would that be a fair categorization? Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
So before we look into letting anyone else have the birds or the victims of this, should it not be pertinent to find out why they died or how they died before? Does an autopsy have to be done before they're passed off to a third party or something like that, just in case there's something more than just a pollutant?
Yeah, and that would be the nature of the protocol, I'm sure. Before, go ahead, Dr. Buchan.
I'm just wondering, is that question future oriented or what happened in this particular case?
Well, in the future, if, like we know these particular eagles were probably killed because of a pollutant, but if all of a sudden 5 or 6 eagles die, and it might be avian flu or something like that, like I think we should be very pertinent, and First Nations should be too, before anything's handed off that could cause more problems. Right. I just,
Yeah, and I'll allow one of you gentlemen to correct me if I'm wrong, but in this case, at least one of the birds was sent away to be evaluated. Director Pucci.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, so the eagles were collected, and conservation came out. They took one. One went to the wildlife shelter and unfortunately passed away after. And one was sent for necropsy, which is an autopsy for fowl, for bird. What was discovered was that the material wasn't hazardous, that they ingested it and died. What it was that it coated their feathers and they were unable to fly, and they either drowned or froze, because it was January or January when this happened in that time frame, and unfortunately they were unable to survive with their feathers coated in the material. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions with regards to the eagles? Go ahead.
Okay, on to a little happier subject. We've recently secured the federal funding portion in a hugely significant way. And before I ask my question, I just want to extend my own appreciation for the efforts of not only previous councils, but especially, most particularly, the staff here who have done so much work. Really, the vast majority of the nuts and bolts of the work that is done by staff, and it could not have happened without their efforts. Also, a shout out to a couple of previous council members. We did this last week, Mayor Lee Brain and Blair Moreau, and MLA Jennifer Rice and MP Taylor Bacharach. So the funding is welcome news and is going to make a huge difference in our efforts to deal with their infrastructure problems. A couple of questions related to it, though. With the funding from both governments in place, what is the structure of oversight required by the federal and provincial governments to ensure that the funds are used appropriately and effectively? And then beyond that, are we also applying a little local knowledge in terms of any additional strategic oversight to reflect what we understand to be the local conditions of the work, and perhaps the nature of the labor market, which we're going to be using to get the work done?
Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, I'll start by saying the city has been very successful in the past in securing capital grants, and has done a lot of very important work. We're in a very fortunate position of having secured very large grants this time, very large funding agreements, outsized funding agreement, unprecedented in Rupert's history, probably unprecedented in the province for the size of our community. Having said that, it's really the same reporting structure. we sign a funding agreement, and then we report back to them that we've spent it in the approved way. So there's a very large agreement that's been signed with the federal government. It's basically the same process as the previous grants that we've received. And if the councillor would refresh me on the purpose of the second question there again, please.
The second question had to do with local, our own local understandings. We understand the physical environment in which this work is taking place in, I use the word, a more intimate way than perhaps federal and provincial authorities have. And we also understand the availability of a workforce to do the work. So are we able to be adaptable to any problems that might arise on a more local level in terms of getting this work done?
Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, I understand that question to mean, do we have the capacity in contractors to do this work? And the answer is yes. Council, previous staff and administration had the foresight to do a master services agreement process, and that was awarded to CTNCA, which is a local contractor, which has partners that have incredible capacity within the province. And the agreement with CTNCA and their partners is that they will be able to do this work, and within the time frame that we are looking at having it done. So they can draw on resources, local and outside of local, in order to get the work done. We do not have concerns, even though it is a very, very large undertaking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any other questions with regards to that matter?
Not with regard to that matter, no.
Let's just circle around, see if there's any other. Councillor Cunningham.
I just, in answer to that, we just passed a resolution to award a contract to a local contractor that was considerably less than the other contractors. So that's an example of we have the local capacity to do it.
Right.
Broadwater winning that by anywhere from 1.1 to 1.9 million dollars,
right,
cheaper than anyone else. So, I really think I agree with Dr. Buchan. We do have the physical capabilities and labor force and expertise to do it. So I'm glad to see that. And also, I believe in the master agreement, part of that was that they will use local labor wherever they can get it and not go out of town. That was what condition we put on it.
All right, go ahead.
On to my last one. At our last meeting, we passed two motions regarding bringing in some ideas and some brainstorming with other partners in the community related to recruitment and retention in healthcare, in local healthcare, specific to some concerns that have arisen around difficulty getting professionals to do the work here. And since then, the ER closed one night, which we at the time didn't anticipate. And so the concern is definitely out there in terms of the public. And so what I'd like to do, recognizing that 2 weeks is not long enough to find people, get them together, have a conversation and solve problems, I'd like a more of a general kind of question. We've put the wheels in motion. Where are the wheels traveling to, and how fast do we think that we're going to be able to get there?
Yeah, no, a very appropriate and timely question. Staff have been working with all those other parties, and it's quite a list, as you know, to find a suitable date. We're given the closure, we're looking to move that earlier if at all possible. And that will be a discussion that takes place over, a medium term, right? It's just not something where it's going to address immediately the the shortcomings, although there could be some short-term solutions that come from that table that nobody's anticipating. But the recruiting retention work is going to be time. It's going to take time. The closure brings an immediacy. It was is very concerning, and as council knows, we wrote a very strongly worded letter to just about anybody that's involved in health, saying under no circumstances can that facility close, and it did. So I have asked staff to put me in contact directly with the Minister of Health, Adrian Dix, and I will convey to him personally that every stop has to be pulled out. There's no value. There's little value in spending 65 million and 77 million in our money and 200 million on upgrading water systems and replacing them so that as I often say, that the small city that hosts a big port can succeed, so that Canada's Gateway can thrive and all that sort of. There's no point in doing all that if the healthcare system isn't also up to speed. And I would add other components in the community must be up to speed as well. But I don't want to detract from healthcare's got to work. People ask themselves some very fundamental questions before they relocate to another community, and the list isn't that long. And on that list, always is what kind of healthcare am I going to have for me and my family? So this is mission critical. I believe it's mission critical to the Port of Prince Rupert. I believe it's mission critical to every industry in town. I believe it's mission critical to every First Nations that's in our community, and we will be aggressively making the case in front of the minister that all stops have to be pulled out. That the very same argument that we placed in front of government with regards to our water pipes is, let's not kid ourselves. While the work that was done by everybody was absolutely fabulous, it was work that hinged on saying you need to treat us a little differently because we host, we are hosting Canada's third largest port. And I went through it today, and so forgive me if my numbers are off just a little bit, but if you look across Canada, all communities over 11,000 people, and conglomerate like Vancouver as one big community and Montreal as one big community, there's 152. And we're 142nd on the list of 100. We are a small city hosting one of Canada's largest ports. And that's what got us to the table for water, and that's what has to be brought into the equation when we're dealing with healthcare. And so I listen, I've watched the Facebook posts. I appreciate that people are concerned they're losing their doctor. They're concerned about access to the emergency ward. They're concerned about all the services at the hospital. And we have to bolster it in the short term while we work together with everyone in putting together a solution that works for the long term. Councillor Eadie.
Just to follow up and make sure that I'm giving credit where credit is due, I heard Minister Dix on the radio I think it was last week, describing programs that are being implemented at the provincial level to address precisely that in the north with respect to recruitment and retention. So it's not like it's a surprise to anybody, and we should acknowledge that those efforts are taking place. We should also acknowledge that Northern Health is also putting a lot of energy into programming and recruitment and retention. So we're not inventing a brand new wheel, but what we are suggesting is that there may be a way to lend some weight to it by involving other stakeholders.
Absolutely, Councillor, and I mean, council could talk all night about it, and intelligently. Like I don't mean wasting time. I mean we could have a very fulsome discussion. The reality is there's been a baby boomer wave coming for since the beginning of the baby boom, and it has repercussions in all kinds of ways, and it means there's a lot more demand on a healthcare system right at a time when there's less people going into some of those fields. I saw an analysis through another bit of work I do of why students weren't going into nursing, and it was very interesting. And the top reason, as I recall, was the rather negative impressions they have of that field of work today. Not that the work isn't, that nursing isn't good work, but that the work environment is such a challenging one. I'm keenly aware that we have a council member who knows far more about it than the rest of us, and unable to speak about it at this table much. But this is not just a Prince Rupert problem. There's no question about that. It is a British Columbia problem. I'm glad I'm not the Minister of Health, and the Minister of Health is going to have the Mayor of Prince Rupert pounding on his table saying, we've got to have solutions that work for Prince Rupert. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for recognizing there's very little I can say due to my multiple hats. So I wonder if we might be able to, we had talked about a few councils ago inviting Julia, who was then the
Yes.
HSA. Jesse Sales was recently announced to be the new HSA. For those that don't know what HSA, it's Health Services Administrator. Julia has been elevated to the SOO, which I want to say is Senior Operating Officer. They changed it from Chief to Senior. If we could maybe still look to have
Absolutely.
one or both of them come and speak to some of the great things that Northern Health is doing,
Right.
as well as some of the opportunities, because
Right.
there are so many great things they're doing that I can't talk about,
Right.
and so many opportunities that they could
And
share.
thank you for that. And yes is the answer. They are our partners in this. They're not the enemy. I want to be clear on that. Particularly those people, those individuals that are working here in this region on our behalf. They labored hard to keep the ER open. They were looking at everything within their power, including chartering float planes, in order to get people in place to be able to keep that facility open. And they have offered to work very closely with us. My suggestion to the entire medical community is as best we can, we want to be helpful in getting you the resources you need to be able to do what it is that you love to do and that you're good at doing. And we're so thankful for every doctor, nurse, everybody, every tech, every administration person that puts the whole place together, every cleaner. I mean, I don't want to water it down, but we're thankful because there's people working really, really hard to deliver service in some really difficult circumstances. And they're doing it, in some cases, at great personal sacrifice. So we don't want to be the critics of people that are already working really hard in our best interest. We're not. That's not what we're saying. We're saying we want to come alongside and see if anything that we can do in raising our voice will help muster more resources. And that's why we're even having this conversation. Healthcare isn't a City of Prince Rupert direct responsibility, but our community's incredibly impacted by it. Councillor Cunningham.
Well, Northern Health is working hard. It's not a unique situation to Prince Rupert, BC, Canada. It's throughout the world. There's a shortage of medical staff. What is unique to Prince Rupert is our isolation to another hospital. And if our ER is closed and they said, sorry, maybe I might need a doctor soon. But, they say that we're working with our partners in transportation and that if you have a heart attack or a serious industrial accident in Prince Rupert, you're 2 hours away from the next ER.
Yeah.
And that's,
If the
that's
road is
unique
open.
to Prince Rupert
Yeah.
and Haida Gwaii. Yes, we have a helicopter medevac here, but even using that, it's still a lot harder than just going to the hospital. And that's what makes our problem a little more unique than other communities. It's the fact of the isolation of Prince Rupert, 150 kilometers away from the next hospital. And not only that, but weather, highway conditions, and a lot of other stuff enter into it. So, even when you are talking to Minister Dix, that's what makes our situation and our closure more unique, more dangerous than any other hospital, simply because of our isolation to the next hospital.
Yep.
And
Fair comment.
God help if, I've had a heart problem that's been solved. I'm grateful to the medical system for solving it. But if I had a heart attack and I needed a hospital real quick, and I had to take an hour and a half, 2 hour ambulance ride, you never know. Minutes count. That golden hour is still there.
Yeah.
And we're beyond that golden hour. Any first aid attendant will tell you how important that golden hour is in any situation.
Yeah.
So it's something that's unique to us, but it's not unique to the world in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Good comment. Councillor Adie, you've got one more, I think?
No, I'm pleased to report that I'm done.
All right. Any other councillors' questions or comments? All right. I do have a couple small ones that just to throw out very, very quickly. I attended last week a housing forum, one day of a housing forum that was a 2-day conference in Terrace. I know that our director Pope was there for both days and actually presented on a panel on one of the days, as well as Grania from the North Coast Transition Society was there, and she was on a panel, and we're very, very fortunate to have North Coast Transition Society doing the work that they do. Of course, everybody knows about the DMAF announcement, and we'll talk about that more as things proceed. But I just think it's really important that people understand that this is a massive help for moving us forward, but it is exactly that. And the RBA is for moving us forward, moving us closer to being on top of infrastructure. It is not money that's designed to reduce tax burdens, or this is our chance to finally get in front of a monster that was just far too big for us to tackle on our own. And so I think it's really important that people understand. And this by itself does not get the job done. There is a whole lot more for us to do in terms of raising money. It's a massive step forward, and we have a whole lot more work to do. So, and I too want to acknowledge the work of our MLA and our MP. And previous councils and all that's taken place to get us to this place. This is always a relay race. No one council finishes anything. They start some things, they finish some things that others started, and they then pass the baton to somebody else. And it just is always that way. And I think it's important to always recognize that where we are in that process. Of course, I did a number of media interviews as a direct result of both the Eagles and the DMAF funding. I have participated. The co-chairs have met since with the RBA, and there's work to be done there. It's great to reach an agreement. It's great to see it in the budget. Now we have to reach an agreement with the province, and so there's work to be done there. And then finally, I hope I'm not usurping anybody in suggesting that we are planning on a town hall for April the 4th. I guess if that's not the case, we'll have to. But that's the plan. Is we're working towards having a town hall state of the city presentation on April 4th, where we can sort of try to give people a sense of where things are at, but also where we see ourselves going, and what role people can play as we go there. Councillor Cunningham.
So the 77 million
Yep.
is actually coming from the disaster mitigation fund.
Correct.
So that sort of ties in with what you were saying. You know, our situation was pretty well a disaster, and you know this is how important this
Yes.
little city with the port
Yes.
is. It's not a little city with a big port. It's a little city feeding a lot of Canada's economy
Correct.
through that port.
Correct.
And so many other communities rely on this community for their livelihoods and economic engines to run. So
There are so many points at which this almost unlikely venture might have come off the rails. I had a front row seat, so I can, talk about it. And I think people, to some degree don't care. You just got the money. But this is a $1 billion fund for all of Canada. For all of Canada. And even if you just divide it in 10 ways, that would be $100 million for the province of British Columbia. Now, I'm not sure that the math is exactly, it'd probably be more population based. So out of, let's call it $100 million, that might have been British Columbia's share, we got 77 million of it. 77 million for a town of 12,000 people. Yeah. I mean, it's just hard to put into words. It's hard to process. Certainly every other mayor and every other city manager and every other public works manager all understand how impossible it is to imagine that a community the size of us got $77 million. And I'll say it over and over and over again because people need to know it. It happened because a whole lot of people did a whole lot of things right. It started with a late evening meeting that happened at a UBCM in 2022 that our director Miller and our MLA threw together that attracted a then candidate David Eby into a 1-hour meeting where staff and Councillor Cunningham and I think Mayor Brain were throwing their suits back on and heading quickly to the meeting so that the premier, the then yet to be premier, could get an introduction to the seriousness of this issue. So that by the time he came into office, he understood it. So that when we declared a state of emergency, which was one of my first official acts, because those pipes were bursting everywhere, and we're calling and saying we need help, he's going, oh my gosh, right? This is what I've been told. And I know that Jennifer Rice was knocking on doors and talking to Bowen Ma and Kang. And so, my first meetings with Bowen Ma, who's Minister of Emergency Service amongst every other thing, and Kang was all around this. And then we went to meet with the Premier in February and got the 65 million. Was it February or March? Anyway, it was roughly this time last year. And then made the rather risky decision of saying, can we leverage this? Could we get the feds to go even bigger? It would have been a lot easier. People would have had a lot less sleepless nights if we'd have just taken 65 million and started spending it. But it was like, this is a once in a lifetime chance to go really, really big. So then, borrowing the money over this course of the summer, and thank you, Prince Rupert, for entrusting us with that. endless hours from Director Pucci, um, back and forth to Ottawa, trying to shape this thing in a way that would just work. The Premier talking directly to the Prime Minister, saying this matters to not only to British Columbia, but to Canada. The Premier making some follow-up calls. All of you at UBCM doing all the things that you did, pushing. Again, another end of reception thing where Director Miller pushed Director Pucci towards the Premier, and Director Pucci said, yeah, we still haven't heard from the feds. And the Premier went, what? I'll make some more calls, and talking to Minister Fraser, who was amazing, and Taylor teeing up questions. Every piece was all around understanding that Canada's gateway, British Columbia's gateway, prairie farmers' ability to move grain, coal mining towns' ability to move coal, energy towns up in the piece, ability to move energy products, that containers both shipping out and coming in, wood pellets, wood products, all at risk, all of it at risk. And so here we are. I will marvel for the rest of my life that we were on the front seat of that venture. Ottawa's left with a fund that's got $77 million less in it to distribute across all of Canada. Dr. Buck.
Your Worship, just to connect 2 points that have been made, 65 million and 77 million. The win on this is about $145 million in total
Of other levels of government.
from this initiative.
And then we put in ours, borrowing, and we take the 13 million from the controversial roundabout, and we get up, $200 million. $200 million. It's unbelievable. And I've said it many times, I'll say it again. As much as people are celebrating us today, you're going to hate me by the time we finish the 3 years of construction, because it won't be fun. But anyway, that's a lot of rambling on, but I think it matters. We have to be so thankful to every one of those people, because at any turn, had they not been there doing what they're doing, I suspect we would not be here celebrating, and we'd be staring at that piece of pipe for the next 3 years, wondering what we're going to do. Anyway. Yeah, I'm sorry to, I'm feeling a little guilty for pontificating, but Councillor.
It's nice to see both levels of government, federal and provincial, work like they did. Our MLA and our MP,
Yes.
They went above and beyond. I don't think there was a minister in Victoria that Jennifer didn't wear her knuckles out knocking on their door.
Absolutely.
And I think Taylor did the same thing in Ottawa.
Absolutely.
Our staff, every time somebody turned around, I think it got to the point at UBCM where, oh, here comes those Rupert people again.
Yeah.
Because, I'd say something to a minister, yeah, we talked to so-and-so and so-and-so already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other piece of that that's important for people to understand, and I know that people go, oh, studies, you did another study. Those studies were the facts on which we were able to make the case, to be able to put a map in front of people that outlined specifically which are the 26.5 kilometers of really high risk pipe. Without that, you're just asking for money. And I've seen so many municipalities wander out of ministers' offices wondering why they didn't get any money. Well, maybe they didn't have staff getting consultants to come in and do engineering reports that were reliable and needed. Yeah, Councillor.
That meeting we had at UBCM in 22, our staff walked in there, and David Eby at the time was just the minister, and you could see the look on his face when our staff started rattling off. Lee and I were there just to do window dressing more than anything, but from the political point of view, we talked to him. but our staff just nailed him with facts and figures.
Yeah.
And I don't think he even knew. And Jennifer had set that meeting up, and like you said, we were sitting back enjoying the end of UBCM and had to rush out right away.
Yeah.
I think there was a few laughs.
You know, and the choir director that puts that all together is Dr. Buchan. He's the one that, you know, sort of enables people to do what they're doing, and you know, they're checking in with him, and he's saying, yes, let's do that, let's go for that, let's. So I mean, it's people always ask
Conductor
me,
of the orchestra.
yeah, and people often ask me, you know, what it's like to be back a second time, and there are things that are different, and the circumstances are different. We have more tools to work with, but one of the things that I tell people, we have great staff. If anything, we don't have enough of them. You're going to see that particularly once the work starts on these construction projects. It takes money to make money. It's just that simple. Anyway, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Randawa, Councillor Cunningham, any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. Thank you very much.
And the kangaroo left the room. I have a whole bag of these at home. Should I bring them down?
Sure, I can take those on.
Put them on Steve's lips.
Yeah. Oh. How do you know they're not already there?
Ooh, wait till I